Hello, everybody, and welcome into a new edition of the Patriots Beat podcast here on the CLNS Media Podcast Network and on Patriots Press Pass. I'm Evan Lazar, and I'm joined, as always, by Alex Barth, who is fighting through a illness here for us today to co-host the podcast with me. But I'm glad that I have Alex back on the show with me today. We're excited to talk about J.C. Jackson and all the Patriots' latest. And, of course, this is the Q&A. So go ahead and drop all your questions in the chat, and we'll get to as many as we possibly can over the next hour or so. Before we get into football, I do want to quickly say that obviously a lot of people, myself included, Alex included, our thoughts and prayers are with the people of the Ukraine right now and what's going on over in Europe. I'm not going to make this a political show. I don't know enough about the situation to give you a take, nor do I want to give you a take, but clearly we understand that that's where a lot of people's heads are at right now. But we're going to talk football here today, continue to talk about football because that's what we do. But obviously thoughts and prayers with the Ukraine and the people of the Ukraine. Stay safe and all those sorts of things. Let's get into it, though, Alex. We didn't have you on the pod on Tuesday. We did discuss the J.C. Jackson situation a little bit. I can't remember if Phil Perry's article came out before or after we taped on Tuesday, but Phil published a great interview with J.C. Jackson. J.C., I think, in some ways was playing his hand, right? His hand is to go to the media and be outspoken about the fact that the negotiations haven't opened yet with the Patriots. As he told NBC Sports Boston, he has not spoken to the Patriots since the end of the season about anything related to his contract or his current situation heading into free agency. Not outside the norm. As I've said, many people said on Twitter when this article came out, the Patriots haven't contacted anybody about free agency yet. None of their free agents have received contract offers or even gotten close to a contract offer from Bill Belichick. But obviously, J.C. Jackson is the most important one out of all these players that are about to hit free agency for New England. I guess besides the fact that JC seems antsy, which I think is totally understandable, what would you do with JC Jackson? Because this is a really tough one. It's one that I go back and forth on too, because is he Darrelle Revis, Ty Law, in that category of elite Hall of Fame talent at cornerback? No. But that doesn't necessarily mean you don't pay the guy, right? I do understand that people that say he's not a true number one shutdown, put him against Stefon Diggs, put him against whoever you want, and have him erase him from the game. I agree that he's not on that level, but he is also only 26, and he's still a very, very good corner.
Yeah, I mean, I think you just covered, a lot of it. I think, and I've used this analogy before with baseball, right? You have number one starters and you have aces, and not every number one starter is an ace. And there's some aces that aren't number one starters. Some teams have two ace caliber pitchers, right? I think J.C. Jackson is as good of a number one as there is without being an ace. And the reason I say that is an ace does something against Stefon Diggs. Those games are kind of what stopped me from putting him in that category. That being said, he is still 26. He theoretically still has another year or two of true development, just based on the way players have trended in recent history. So I don't think you can rule out him potentially getting to that ace. The other thing is, if they had another corner, right, like when they moved on from Gilmore, well, they had Jackson, so that worked. Corner is already a top 3 need for this team, and that's if Jackson comes back. You're potentially looking at needing to add 2 starting caliber players in a position that's very tough to add talent. Yeah. So they can't afford to lose him in my mind. They can't. Now, tag and trade, if you can get back a corner or a first-round pick, but somewhere where you can realistically get up to Andrew Booth, then maybe you do it. I just don't think, and I know people are saying, well, JC, he talks too much, and, they bring up the Diggs games. The talking too much, that's how corners are. Yeah. Every corner's like that. Even Gilmore was like that. And he wasn't necessarily as boisterous about it, but the words he said, the dude was confident. And I think you have to be that way to be an elite corner in the NFL, right? The game is basically set up for you to go out there and get beat every single time you take the field. And you have to internalize the idea that you won't get beat. You have to have that mentality. In terms of the comments, earlier in the week, you're right. I think he is just playing his hand. He's never been through free agency like this before, right? He got the RFA tender last year, but just Jackson's not the guy, so just move on from him and upgrade. It's not that easy. You can't just do that, right? That's every team in the league that wants to upgrade their corner this offseason is looking at JC Jackson. He is the upgrade. Okay. Yeah. That's like a Packers. It's not, I guess it's not quite the same, but like a Packers fan saying, let's move on from Aaron Rodgers and get a better quarterback. He's the best one on the market. It's not going to work that way. Or upgrade from Devontae Adams. It's the same thing. JC Jackson's the top of the cornerback market this year. So unless you want to go into a season with Jalen Mills as your number one outside corner and Juwan Williams at best at your number two corner, you have to keep JC Jackson. So I think the team ultimately recognizes that. I think the team will keep him. I wouldn't be surprised if he's one of these guys that gets franchised, plays under the franchise for a year, and then leaves. I don't know that the team can necessarily afford that. I think if they franchise him, they're doing it with the goal of a long-term deal to get that cap number down. But they have to have him. You can't waste years of Mac Jones' rookie contract. You have to keep him. And if the cost of that is a $17 million cap hit, then the cost of that is a $17 million cap hit.
Yeah, I feel that your ace versus number one pitcher analogy is perfect, right? Because he's not an ace. He's not Pedro Martinez in his prime, right? That's not who he is. Like I said, he's not Darrelle Revis. He's not Stefon Gilmore. He's not Ty Law in their primes of their careers. But what I do find interesting is Stefon Gilmore, when the Patriots signed him to that contract, was not Stefon Gilmore yet, right? He had had some struggles and some really bad seasons for Buffalo. They drafted him high. He didn't live up to the expectations of the high draft pick, and they didn't retain him in Buffalo. And the Patriots signed him as a 26-year-old corner with great traits, great athleticism, top 10 talent, and they gave him the contract, and he ends up becoming the best cornerback in football. So you look at JC, he's at the same age as all these guys, the same age as Gilmore, but he's also at the same age as Asante Samuel, Malcolm Butler, right? Aqib Talib, right in that same 26, 27-year-old range. So there's precedent for both directions for Bill Belichick, as there often is with these sort of things. I am still in the camp that you cannot allow him to walk for nothing simply because you don't have anything coming down the pipeline, as you said. If they had hit on the Juwan Williams pick and Juwan Williams was maybe the next guy to take the mantle, then I could maybe be more comfortable with walking away from JC Jackson. At this point, I don't really see where do you go from there? You can, even if you look at the 21st pick in the draft coming up here in April, maybe you luck into a guy like Andrew Booth Jr., who I think has number one cover talent ability, right? But you're not going to get that guy week one in September on the field to be a shutdown corner immediately, or a corner on JC Jackson's level immediately. Even the best draft picks take some time to develop and come along and grow into the systems that they're put in and grow to the NFL game. So I think you're looking at a real steep drop off in the secondary. Even if you use your first round pick on a corner, it's still going to be a steep one. Now, we talked to both of us a little bit there, touched on the tag and trade scenario. That's where we can take it first. And then I think we can also look at maybe some other options in free agency or something like that. But the tag and trade, I know a lot of people have this take that the tag and trade is the best strategy. I looked at a couple today of the recent history of the tag and trade and what teams got for guys, right? So Frank Clark and a first round pick from Seattle goes to Kansas City. They got a little bit of a haul for Frank Clark, but they also added one of their own picks in, right? It was Clark and a third for a first, a third, and a second in 2021 or 20, the following draft, whatever that following draft was. Frank Clark went from Kansas City D Ford went from Kansas City to San Francisco and got a second round pick, just D Ford for a second round pick straight up. So you're looking at potentially a first round pick being on the table, certainly at least a second round pick being on the table. And then maybe you can get something tacked onto that. Maybe it's a second and a third, maybe it's a first and a fifth, right? Something like that is a possibility. I think having 2 first round picks sounds like a lot of fun, certainly for us. If we could theorize all the different ways that they could use 2 first round picks, that would make for some great shows and some great mock drafts. But I don't, again, I get concerned as can they really draft a player at that pick that's going to be as good as JC Jackson? You're hoping that you're drafting somebody that's as good as JC. Now, maybe you can look at it and say the contract value makes sense, where you're only paying that guy a fraction of what you're paying JC. And even if he's 75% as good, you're getting a huge discount on the deal. But I don't know if the Patriots should really be operating with that sort of thinking nowadays. Maybe 10 years ago when they had prime Tom Brady, it would have been a little bit different.
Yeah, the other thing is, and we've talked about this a little bit on the air. I don't know how off the air. I don't know how much we've talked about it on the air. This isn't a great cornerback class, right? Gardner, and like they're obviously going to get a higher first than 21 if they make that trade. Or they might not. That's the thing. You need, like, where's the first rounder you're getting back? Not getting a top 10 pick. You're not trading JC Jackson for a top 10 pick, as nice as that would be.
Right.
It's probably going to be somewhere 10 to 20 or lower. They're not going to have a shot at Stingley or Gardner.
Yes.
Booth is a nice thought, but where's he going to go? And he's actually the consensus mock pick for the Patriots right now at 21, and he's 22 on the consensus big board. So maybe him. There's a pretty stark drop off after that.
Yeah.
I don't know that I love any of these corners, especially not as year one number one guys.
Washington. McDuffie can play, Trent McDuffie, but I think when you look at Trent McDuffie, the reason why I have Booth ahead of McDuffie in my personal rankings is because I think McDuffie is at the best a Z slot shadow, right?
He's not replacing JC Jackson.
I don't think he's somebody, right? I don't think that he's somebody that's going to play the majority of his snaps on the outside. And that's not necessarily a bad thing because you need that guy too, right? If you want to pair McDuffie with somebody like JC, and then you go up against Miami and JC gets Devontae Parker and McDuffie gets Jalen Waddle, that makes a whole lot of sense. But I don't know if McDuffie is a true outside corner, pure X receiver cover talent. I think he's more of a guy that's going to take the flanker or take the Z receiver in the offense.
Yeah, look, I mean, it's an important role for sure. We saw what happened this year when the Patriots lost Jonathan Jones. It's essentially the role you're describing, right? So I just don't, I don't know that trading again, you have to, if you're not bringing back Jackson, you need to add somebody who you believe can actually be your number one outside corner. In like Booth, maybe.
I think you can.
Depending on what pick they get. But again, I think you have to get a top 20 pick. I don't think Booth's making it to 21. So Booth is the wild card here. Outside of him, I just don't think there's a situation where you deal Jackson and you get that number one corner back. I just don't think that happens. And then, okay, you can still try to round things out, but the secondary is going to be an absolute mess. You're going into what should be, it's such a good building block here in year one. Now, all of a sudden, it feels like you're taking a step backwards. Like if you, pending something spectacular, if you move on from JC and Jonathan Jones can't play outside to answer the question in the chat.
Right.
If you move on from JC Jackson, right, the secondary is going to be worse than it was last year.
Yeah.
I feel comfortable pretty much outside of something spectacular. Jair Alexander holds out in Green Bay and you get your hands on him, right?
Right.
If you move on from JC Jackson, the secondary is going to be worse than it was last year. Period. Full stop. So if you think the best course of action is to tag and trade JC Jackson, just know what you're saying is, I am comfortable if the Patriots secondary is worse than it was last year. And there's people who make that argument. There's some people who say, well, instead of giving JC Jackson $17 million, you give $10 million to a wide receiver and then $5 million to a corner, and then you have $2
Right.
million to play with. Maybe that's a running back.
You're staring at a situation where Eli Apple and Jalen Mills are your starting
right.
outside
You
corners.
basically exactly you are counting on Mac Jones and that offense to average over 30 points a game.
Yeah.
You are basically saying we're going to take this money, we're going to put it into the offense, and we're going to win every game in shootouts. They don't have the core to do that. They just don't. So just keep in mind that's what you are asking for if you want to tag and trade Jackson. And to answer a question in the chat, could a Gilmore return happen? Even if it did, at this point, if you swapped Jackson for Gilmore, secondary is worse than it was last year. Stefon Gilmore was good in Carolina. He wasn't
okay.
defensive player of the year staff. Like,
no.
I'll put it bluntly to you, Evan. Week 1 next year, who would you rather have as your forget the money? Just you get to put one of these guys out there. Jackson, Gilmore, who would you rather have as your starting corner?
Probably Jackson, but I think the bridge is not burned in terms of I think Stefon Gilmore doesn't have any ill will towards the Patriots organization on the whole. I don't see them bringing him back. It doesn't make much sense. But there is a debate there. I do think if you want to play devil's advocate out of Stefon Gilmore at 2 for 24 versus 4 for 72.
Okay.
For JC Jackson, right? I think that one thing that you could look at with a guy like Gilmore, and I look at this free agency class, and Gilmore is really the only one that I could think of doing this. If you want to go 2017 and say, who's the Stefon Gilmore to JC Jackson's Malcolm Butler, then maybe it'd be like somebody like Carlton Davis, who's a free agent with Tampa Bay right now. But I don't think Carlton Davis is Stefon Gilmore 2017, right? He was a later draft pick. He's got some limitations and some flaws to his game as well. I don't think that
he's been hurt a lot too.
Yeah, I don't think that he's in that category. I think the one thing that you look at with Gilmore is if you could potentially bring somebody like Gilmore back, it does buy you time to develop that next guy, right? It does buy you another year or two to do it. I don't think it's going to happen just because of all the politics that happened, obviously, recently with Gilmore. But I look at this draft and I see, okay, could they bring a bridge like a Gilmore in for a year or two, draft Kyler Gordon, have him develop for a year, and then become the number one? Or draft Kaiir Elam from Florida, have him develop for a year or two, and then become the number one. Maybe that's a solution for them, but I still feel like this is way overcomplicating it, and we're just getting back to the point of just pay JC Jackson and be done with it. And I can't get off that point, no matter how many different scenarios I come up with in my head of, oh, they could draft Booth, or they could do this, or they could do that. I mean, at the end of the day, the simplest thing to do is just to pay JC Jackson his money.
Right. In some sense, it's the Family Guy mystery box thing. Yeah. Right.
Yes.
You can, you go to the sales conference. They say they'll give you a free boat. Well, you can take the boat or you can take the mystery box. And Peter says, we'll take the mystery box. Could be anything. It could even be a boat, right? You're moving on from JC Jackson to sign Carlton Davis and hope he develops, or draft one of these corners and hope they develop. Develop into who?
Yeah.
JC Jackson. You already have him and he's 26. It's not like he's 30 and it's, well, do we want to reset the clock on the development? Some of these corners in the draft are already 22. You're not really resetting the clock much. You're resetting it financially, but not in terms of age. Any of these guys you're drafting, best case scenario, they turn into JC Jackson, who you already have. They got to figure out a way to keep him. They do. It's that simple.
Yeah, that's the way that I put and feel at this point too. But it is a tough one. Like I said at the beginning, your ace versus number one starter thing I think fits JC perfectly. He's not he's not a perennial Cy Young Award winner, right? He's not He's not one of those types of guys, but he certainly is good enough to be the number one guy in your rotation.
Right. He's not Max Scherzer.
Right.
But, is he
Nate Eovaldi?
No, he's no. Nate Eovaldi's not the comp. It's more like
you're the baseball guy, so you
honestly sort of Chris Sale recently.
Right. Yeah.
Although that's not fair with the injuries. I guess this is, what was I going to say? Here comes the COVID fog. With JC, I don't know. Keep going.
Yeah.
I forget. It was like a good question too. Yeah. What were you saying? Oh, I remember. The thing that's intriguing about Jackson is his age. Like I don't and maybe, I don't know, maybe you feel the same way. I haven't ruled out the concept of Jackson becoming an ace. I still think he has a year or two of getting better.
Yeah.
So do you feel the same way about that, to continue to use that analogy?
Yeah, I think he could still develop. I think that the one thing that you look at with JC and his development is, does he have the physical tools to reach another level, right? When they signed Gilmore to the contract that they signed him to, they signed him to that deal because at the combine 4 years prior, he absolutely blew it out of the water, right? I mean, he was an elite tester, an elite athlete. I don't know if JC has the reactionary athleticism, the raw long speed, those types of things to go to the next level physically, mentally, concentration, focus, route anticipation, those types of things. I think you can always improve, right? You can always get better at. Does he have another level from a physical tools, or is he maxing out his physical tools now? I think is an interesting discussion that I'm sure they're talking about in the facility. The other thing I'm sure they're talking about internally is a lot of his interceptions came against Sam Darnold's and, these, quarterbacks that are not very good, against these passing teams that are not very good. At some point, that's how Bill Belichick thinks, right? You got to consider, is he actually better or worse than the production? Are the interception numbers there? Because for the first 3 years, he was paying next to Stefon Gilmore and all these other types of things. That's where you get into the muddy waters of paying him that lucrative long-term extension. I still think I would do it, especially in today's NFL, but there's definitely a conversation to be had there. And based off past precedent, Asante Samuel, Malcolm Butler, it probably leans towards, in Bill Belichick's world, letting J.C. Jackson go. And that's a bummer, but that's kind of where they have been in the past with a player like that.
Well, I wouldn't know, because Samuel, they tagged, and he played under a tag for a year, and then he walked.
They could do like what they did with Samuel and have him play on the tag for a year. Yes.
Yeah, Butler's the only comp. I would say people have used Revis as a comp. He's not, because he was older. Right. Those are the two comps. They're Butler and Samuel, and I would argue Samuel is a better player than Butler. I think we both agree with that. It's a little tough because it's different eras.
Right.
I would say Jackson is closer to the player he is to Samuel than he is to Butler. Yeah. I don't know that he's as good as Samuel was, but he's a lot closer than he is to Butler.
Yeah. And I also don't think it's necessarily 100% fair to say that J.C. Jackson can't cover number ones just because Stefon Diggs is a tough matchup for him. Look, he's covered other number ones before pretty successfully. Diggs just is kind of his kryptonite right now. And I think it's really comes down to the pure route running and release package that Stefon Diggs has. It's really difficult to play physical press man against Diggs, and it's really difficult to play off man against Diggs because he's so good at the top of the route, right? So he's just a tough guy to cover, but for everybody. I mean, the guy was an all-pro 2 years ago. He's one of the best receivers in football. So just because he's had trouble with Stefon Diggs, I don't think that necessarily means that he can't cover other number one receivers. He might just have a little bit of trouble with Diggs in particular. And I don't hate the idea of the Patriots going in the future of looking at it and saying, okay, well, we're going to put J.C. Jackson on Gabriel Davis and we're going to double Stefon Diggs, right? I don't think that that's a terrible strategy moving forward either, if he still continues to have trouble with Diggs. So either way, he's still helpful, right? Whether he's singling with Gabriel Davis and they'd have to roll the coverage over to Stefon Diggs, or he evolves and adapts and gets better and is able to take Diggs by himself, he's still a valuable player to have regardless of what happens there. Okay. Yeah. Let's answer some of these questions. If you got questions, drop them in the chat. Let's leave Miles Bryant out of this for a little while, guys. Okay. I mean, come on, don't be so mean to the guy. If you have questions, drop them in the chat now. We'll answer them as many as we possibly can here in the next 20 minutes or so. I saw one earlier that I thought was a good one about day 2 wide receivers. This person asked specifically about Jalen Tolbert. I look at this class of wide receivers, and the more I look at it, the more I really, really like some of these options on day 2. Somebody had the question earlier as well. I'm going to find this one. This is the one that we need to get to, that Alex has been just clamoring to debate with me or talk to me about since the draft process began. And that was Wan'Dale Robinson against Sky Moore.
Yes. And this is a big question.
Here it is. Where do you fall in this debate? Because this is a fun one. I think both have a really good case, but you go ahead and give yours.
Yeah, let me start off by saying I think if the Patriots end up with either guy, it's a good pick. And you're probably looking at Wan'Dale Robinson in the second round, Sky Moore in the third round, so it becomes a value thing. We did this last year with the tiers of the players and COVID brain again, Jalen, North Texas, drafted by the Bucks.
Jalen Darden
and Kadarius Toney, and we stacked them all last year. This year it kind of goes, I almost said Jerry Jeudy. Man, this is John Mechie, Wan'Dale Robinson, Sky Moore, right? And then you can get into some of the other guys a little further down. Right. Again, I like both players. I think that Sky Moore is probably a little bit more polished, which they'll like. And then, by the way, Bo Melton would be the day 3 guy in this tier. I like Sky Moore. I think he's polished. I think he's a good route runner. I think he's the guy that they are going to like better. He's more traditionally their pick.
Yeah.
That being said, I think what this team really needs in whatever facet on the offensive side of the ball, whether it's a receiver, a running back, a tight end, is somebody who can create with the ball in their hands, kind of like what we thought Jonnu Smith would be last year. Wan'Dale Robinson, to me, is that guy. Wan'Dale Robinson is, whether it's a slant, a screen, an end around, whether it's lining up as a running back, and he is a converted running back, so he has experience doing that. He can kind of be that sort of gadget player. You can line up all over the formation, that Deebo Samuel type. I think Wan'Dale Robinson really fits the need of that explosive ball carrier. And they'd have to coach him up a little bit on the finer points of being a receiver. Again, he did just switch to receiver 2 years ago, so he's new to this. And I know we have our, we're wary about certain areas of the coaching staff, but I think him working with Troy Brown, that would be a great fit. Basically, the parts of the game I think Robinson is missing, the parts of his game I think he needs to, not missing, but needs to really round out, are what Troy Brown was so great at as a player. So I see that as a mix. So I think either one is a great addition. I don't know that either one on their own is the difference maker. You want to pair this guy with an X, whether it's, a first round pick, a guy, one of the true X's, like I guess not Jahan Dotson in their system, but, or probably more likely a free agent or a veteran acquisition, like a Mike Williams or maybe a Calvin Ridley. But I think either one of these guys can give the offense a dynamic they really need.
Yeah. So this is a conversation of an more explosive ball carrier in Wan'Dale Robinson versus the route runner in Sky Moore, right? Sky Moore.
They both win in similar fashion, but they do it in different ways.
Similar areas of the field, right? Like if you had a heat map of where their targets were and where their touches were, there would be a lot of overlap, but they do it in different ways. Exactly. Sky Moore has some of the best feet that I've seen of any wide receiver prospect in this draft. He can get off press coverage, really sudden, quick movements at the line of scrimmage to get off press, separates well at the top of the route. And although he's not game breaking like Wan'Dale is with the ball in his hands, I like how he slithers with the ball, right? I think he has that kind of Julian Edelman, like duck and weave in and out of contact. Maybe not somebody that's going to run away from the whole defense when he gets in the open field, but certainly sets up blocks well down the field, kind of navigates and eludes tacklers and wiggles in and out of contact. I like those elements of his game, but it's his route running that really stands out. The concern that I have with Wan'Dale is the same as I have, like, in the first round version of this is Treylon Burks, right? What is his route tree with the Patriots, and what is his usage in New England? And can they get more out of him than just heading him the ball on a jet sweep or throwing a screen to him, or maybe having him run slants over the middle or something like that? Can he expand and develop his route tree to have a complete usage with the Patriots offense? That is a concern that I would have with any prospect, not just Wan'Dale that's in this mold, because I look at the Patriots and I say, at least the Josh McDaniels version of their offense, we'll see what it looks like moving forward. You have to fit into a role to be productive here. You can't just take a player and build a new thing out of it, because they haven't had real success with that. Otherwise, Johnny Smith would have had a huge year last year, and N'Keal Harry might have actually panned out here in New England. If there's not a built-in role within their system that fits the player, then I think it makes it difficult to project that player into their offense. Sky Moore is one of those guys that I can sit here and say, you give him Julian Edelman's route tree and he's going to produce on that route tree. What's Wan'Dale Robinson's role that already exists in the Patriots offense, right?
So
That's a concern that I would have with it.
Can I go a little outside of the box to try to answer that question?
Yes.
Peak James White. White, when they used to line him up out, remember, because they used to line him up outside like 35, 40% of the time, right? Or in the slide, they lined him up as a receiver 35, 40% of the time. And again, he is a converted running back. What if he's your answer to potentially losing James White? And then what if he doesn't fill any one player's role, but he half fills the loss of James White and half fills the loss of Julian Edelman? Again, that's still kind of new. So it doesn't totally disprove your concern, which I think is a valid one. But they're not just going to keep, at a certain point, they have to just stop hitting repeat.
That's the best argument you've made so far about how they could use Wan'Dale Robinson effectively. This is not a Wan'Dale Robinson problem. This is a Patriot problem. Right. And when I look at a guy like Sky Moore, I know, okay, Sky Moore is going to play the Z. He's going to play Julian Edelman's role. He's going to run Julian Edelman's routes, and he's going to be productive running them.
Right.
Easy projection, easy transition, all those types of things. With guys like Burks, with guys like Wan'Dale, they need that, right? They need the play speed. Right. They need the big play explosiveness that those guys bring to the table that Sky Moore might not necessarily bring. But unfortunately, they don't know how to use it properly, and they don't know how to harness it. And then they also don't really have a great track record of taking guys with limited route trees and developing them into more expanded football players. So it stinks. It stinks that we can't just sit here and pound the table for a guy like Wan'Dale Robinson because he feels like a perfect fit and a perfect amount of juice for what they need at that spot. Same with Treylon Burks. Treylon Burks should be a guy that we're talking about as a first-round pick at number 21 for the Patriots. But all of us are terrified of them drafting a guy like Treylon Burks and having him turn into N'Keal Harry 2.0. So it is what it is. Speaking about these coaching, along these coaching lines, I should say.
Well, I'm just curious, like the thing with him and James White, that's not you would buy that? You don't think that's totally out of the box?
No, I'm not saying it's totally out of the box. I buy it more than them trying to figure out some sort of role of him as a Z or something like that and crafting a new role for him there. It's the best argument you've made so far of how they could use Wan'Dale Robinson effectively. Yes.
All right. There's also a really good question back there, and it's Dexter Johnson at 1628. I don't know if you can find that one.
Yeah, I saw that one. I want to get to this coaching one real quick, just because we were talking about coaching. So Albert Breer, your guy Scott Zolak, a bunch of people have already. Mike Reese have put out their projected lineup for the Patriots coaching staff. One of the biggest ones out there right now is that Joe Judge is going to coach quarterbacks, which I totally understand for so many reasons is DEFCON 5. I did this the other show too, and I did it backwards. DEFCON 5 for the Patriots, right? That Joe Judge is going to be the quarterbacks coach. I don't think Joe Judge is going to be alone at coaching the quarterback. The guy that I really think that's going to ultimately have a lot of the responsibility on the direction of Mac Jones is going to be Bill himself. But I understand that Bill can't be everywhere all the time, right? So if he's needed someplace else or if he's focusing on something else one day, they're going to have to leave the responsibility up to somebody when Bill's coaching defense or Bill's coaching the secondary or Bill's over there, over here, or whatever. But I do feel like Belichick is going to have a massive, massive hand, as he always had with quarterbacks. This is nothing new. He's coached up Tom Brady. We will go watch Man in the Arena and listen to how much Tom Brady talks about how much Bill Belichick meant to his development, right? And teaching him through the eyes of a defensive coordinator how a defense is going to be structured to go up against you is obviously a very massive thing. Where do you stand on the offensive coaching staff, on Joe Judge, all these things that obviously do not sound too enticing right now?
By the way, DEFCON 5 is the normal readiness. So
DEFCON 1 then.
Yeah, DEFCON 1 would be, which is never, ironic we're bringing that up. DEFCON 1's never been reached so far, knock on wood.
The best analogy right now.
I said it. I've said it a couple times since the whole kind of coaching thing happened. I care more about them getting a dedicated quarterbacks coach than getting an offensive coordinator. And it sounds like Joe Judge, even if he is the quarterbacks coach, regardless of whether we think he's a competent quarterbacks coach or not, is going to have other responsibilities. He's not just going to be the quarterbacks coach. Bill Belichick, obviously, other responsibilities. So maybe between the two of them, somebody is always around, I guess. I still don't love that setup. Even if it's somebody, I mean, Bo Hardigree was a relative unknown. They brought him in kind of late in the process, but he was there. He was around. So even if it's bringing in that kind of guy, like right before OTAs, which they've done in the past, they've brought in staff as late as July.
Right.
Just finding some sort of designated quarterbacks coach, I still think that's a need. Whether it's Judge, whether it's Bill, who's taking the reins on Mac's development, those guys have other things going on. That's the reality of it. You need somebody on the staff who's not named Adam Gase, who's worked with quarterbacks before, who will be around 100% of the time. And I get like Brian Hoyer, I guess, is the backup, but it's different. Yeah. It's different. It'd be nice to have a true dedicated coach as well. So
it could be somebody like Tyler Hughes, who we haven't really talked about a whole lot, but has been an offensive assistant on the staff for a couple of years now.
Yeah.
Honestly, the guy, and I didn't realize this. I read a little bit more about Nick Caley over the last couple of days. Nick Caley's been coaching at the college and pro level for 18 years now. He's 39 years old. He's been coaching with the Patriots for 8 seasons. So in some ways, I always defer to this. Just give more responsibility to Caley, right? Like I really feel like he's a guy that has not been talked about enough. Tom Pelissero put him on a list of future head coaches. Pelissero puts this out every single year. Gerard Mayo is on it almost every single year. Nick Caley made it for the first time this year. I would much rather put Joe Judge with the tight ends. You go coach Hunter Henry, who already knows what the heck he's doing anyways, right? And have somebody like Nick Caley get a different role as the quarterbacks coach.
But is Caley also the play caller? Again, can somebody?
Well, I would rather the play caller also be the quarterbacks coach, right?
That's true.
I think that is something that needs to be in lockstep. I mean, obviously, for years, Josh McDaniels was sort of the quarterbacks coach and the OC.
Right, but even last year, they also had Bo Hardigree. So I guess that's kind of what I'm saying is.
Right. So maybe it becomes like a Tyler Hughes. Maybe it's somebody outside the organization we don't know of yet. Right.
That's more who I'm looking for. Like, I'm not saying you're wrong about Caley with being the quarterbacks guy. Like, I would actually agree with that. But even then, if Caley's the play caller, if Caley's with the quarterbacks and Judge is calling plays, then I guess I'm good. In terms of the quarterback coach, I don't know that that's how I want to structure it with the play caller. But if Caley's going to be the play caller, even if he is the quarterbacks coach, give me that Bo Hardigree. Give me somebody else who's just around in the room.
Sure.
Because something we heard
could just be Hoyer. Like, they could just think that's Hoyer.
I guess it's Hoyer. Like, something we heard a lot about Mac last year in camp, and we heard this from Cam Newton, was that he showed up right away asking questions. He was always asking questions. I don't want there to be a spot where he has a question and there's nobody around to answer it. That's basically where I'm at with Mac. Yeah. And I just want somebody around to answer the question. That's pretty much that's my feeling.
Brian Hoyer. So. Fair enough.
And I guess if it's Brian, I'd like there to be a dedicated coach, but I guess if it's Brian, they do need a backup quarterback. They do. And right now, I guess they do have one. It's Stidham, but
maybe not saying that Stidham would get the call if Mac goes down, it would probably still be Brian Hoyer, right? Not Stidham. But in this world where they need the backup quarterback to run scout team, or they need the backup quarterback to do different things during practice, maybe they just allowed Jared Stidham to do all the backup quarterback duties during practice because Brian Hoyer is, hip to hip with Mac Jones all the time, right?
Right.
And maybe that's sort of the way to go here. You wanted to get to this question from Dexter. I like it too.
It's a fun question. Yeah.
These are the things that, honestly, the Patriots in their draft room, in their prep, they answer questions just like this, right? Scenarios where if these two guys that we both really like, that we have very, very high in our ratings, are both available when we're on the clock, who are we taking and why? These seem to me like the 4 guys that I would say, once you get past this wave, right? If they're on the clock at 21 and one of these 4 names is not available still, then I think they're trading back, right? I think this is sort of the cutoff of the talent. And
I would even say with Lloyd, I think there's a chance they trade back just because this linebacker class is so good.
Really good.
Yeah.
You know how I feel about Lloyd, so I'm with you on that one.
I would almost replace Lloyd in this hypothetical with Trevor Penning if you want to include a fourth guy.
Yeah, I have a tough time with Trevor Penning at 21. I don't know what it is, but I have a tough time for that.
So before we answer this question, let's answer a different question. Sitting there at 21, Davis, Olave, Booth gone. Lloyd, Penning.
Ugh. I would probably take Penning strictly because I think Devin Lloyd's a better prospect, right? I think I will have a higher grade on Devin Lloyd than I do on Trevor Penning.
Yeah.
But the drop off from Trevor Penning to Raymond or whoever your next tackle is, I think is more substantial than your drop off from Devin Lloyd to Christian Harris, right? Or Devin Lloyd to Quay Walker or Chad Mumma or whoever your next linebacker is. So for that reason, I would take Penning, but I do think that Lloyd is overall the better prospect, and I'm going to be lower on Lloyd than some people, which I get. But I think that that's where I would go at with that. But in this situation, to answer the question, out of this group, I think Jordan Davis is the best player at his position in the field, right? Yeah. He's also the most limited in terms of his usage. He's going to be a nose tackle. He has to be a nose tackle. He might be able to play like over a guard or shaded over the guard, but he's going to be a nose tackle. He's going to be in the middle of the line. You're probably going to take him off the field on third down. He's Vince Wilfork, right? That's the type of player. I
still think you're underselling him as a pass rusher, but okay.
Maybe I am. I think that there was a lack of exposure in that sense at Georgia, right? They used him because they brought on their Devontae Wyatts and their Trayvon Walkers, and they brought on the next wave of their pass rush talent, right? They basically had line changes when they felt like they got into passing situations. So maybe on a team that wants to stick with the same core group and isn't rotating guys as much out like Georgia did, there's a difference here. It's the same thing I should mention. The same thing happened to Christian Barmore at Alabama, right? Alabama went 10 deep on the defensive line, so he didn't always play, right? It wasn't because he wasn't awesome. He just didn't always play. So maybe Jordan Davis has some untapped potential there as a pass rusher. I will say, if you're going to single block Jordan Davis in the pass rush, good luck anchoring against his bull rush, right? Like that's the difference, is that a guy like Jordan Davis might not give you the on-ball production of a Christian Barmore, for example, in terms of pressures and sacks and things like that, but he's going to occupy guys and give single blocks to everybody else. So if they try to single him with the center or with the guard over the nose, that guard's going to get walked back into the quarterback by Jordan Davis. So you have to have that as a category in his pass rush ability. It's his bull rush, his ability to dent or collapse the pocket. But again, let's get back to the question. Yeah. I still lean towards Davis. I like the idea if they bring J.C. Jackson back. I actually like the idea of drafting Booth even more because I think pairing J.C. Jackson with Andrew Booth is the Patriots' no-fly zone in 2022, right? Like I think that has real potential. Maybe not 2022, but if you're signing JC to a 4-year contract and you're drafting Booth now in 2023, 2024, 2025, you're going to have a really dominant secondary, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, I love Olave. So this is a really tough one. I don't know where I go with it. If you force me to answer the question without free agency and without knowing where they go, I take Chris Olave.
So to me, it depends on free agency, right? If Jackson leaves, it's Booth because corner is such a monumental need. If Jackson leaves 21, you're taking the best corner on the board, whether it's Booth or whoever it is. If Jackson stays, like I think he will, I'm taking Olave. I think Davis is the best player like you do. I've said I think Jordan Davis should be a top 10 pick in this draft.
Right.
That being said, we've talked about on this show going back to last year, why do the Patriots struggle to draft receivers? And the reason being simply that a big part of it being college receivers. The college game has drifted so far from the NFL game. And the Patriots offensive system, even by NFL standards, is a little archaic, that you're essentially asking receivers coming directly from the college level to learn a new sport.
Yeah.
Chris Olave's game and the way he's developed at Ohio State actually pairs well with the Patriots offensive system. I don't know that there's been a wide receiver that's a better fit for the Patriots specifically
Yeah.
in the last few years, not just this year, but I'm talking about
The
going back
only
3,
one
4
that
years.
is even close is Justin Jefferson, who was a slam dunk pick in a similar way for different
Right.
reasons. I would say that they won and ran routes a little bit differently. Olave is definitely more of a vertical route runner, right? He's somebody that's going to play more vertical game than Justin Jefferson, who can make some of those quicker routes underneath the defense. Not that Olave can't do that, but that's his game at Ohio State was getting up the field, right?
But
He was a
again,
vertical route runner there.
he's going to understand the Patriots offense way better than your average college wide receiver. And guys like that don't come along often. So
yeah, when you're watching a guy like Chris Olave, I think what separates him from me from everybody else in this class as a route runner and as a technician is how few wasted steps or wasted movement he has in and out of his route breaks, right? If you go watch an Ohio State game, go watch Chris Olave and then watch Garrett Wilson on the other side and look at how much quicker Chris Olave gets in and out of a break than Garrett Wilson does, right? Garrett Wilson, it takes him 3 or 4, sometimes 5 steps to gather, get in and out of the break, and get open. He's got great quickness at the top of the route, create separation, but he takes a lot of steps. He's very leggy to get to that point. With Chris Olave, it's so damn smooth. Like there's no wasted movement. There's no extra steps in his breaks. It's just in and out. And those types of receivers always have done such good things with the Patriots. And he's just really a perfect blend of, okay, he does have that acceleration and that burst off the line of scrimmage to get up the field and create some big plays with his route running down the field. But he also has that ability to run. If you're calling him to run an out, he's going to run the out at the yardage marker that you want him to run at every single time. He's not going to drift. He's not going to take 10 minutes to get out of the break. You're going to tell him to run. If you tell him to run an 11-yard out, he's running the out at 11 yards, right? You tell him to run a 5-step slant, it's a 5-step slant, no problem. Those are the types of things that I think separate him from the rest of these guys. The only guy I have ahead of Olave on my wide receivers rankings is Jamison Williams, just because I don't think you can teach that kind of speed. When you have that level of speed, it's just a difference. There's just a different pace that he moves at versus the rest of the class. But if I was grading it strictly on who's technically the best wide receiver in the draft, it's Chris Olave to me. Guys like Jamison, just different type of speed, and I will always have those guys higher. All right, let's stick with wide receivers here for a second.
Can I add one addendum onto that? Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I saw some people in the chat bring up Nikobi Dean, and Nikobi Dean is a guy people have had that conversation with, right? They put him in the spot at Devin Lloyd there. The thing about Nikobi Dean is he's basically he's listed right now at 6 foot 225. There's speculation he's going to measure in at the combine at 5'10.
He's smaller than Kyle Duggar.
He's right. He's not a linebacker. Bill is not looking at Nikobi Dean thinking this is a linebacker I need. He's looking at Nikobi Dean thinking this is a safety I already have. Yeah. So I get it. Everybody is all in on, hey, the Patriots need fast linebackers, and Nikobi Dean is fast, and he played linebacker at Georgia. He's not the guy. He's not going to solve the problems the Patriots have. He's going to end up just sitting behind Kyle Duggar and Adrian Phillips if they draft him.
Yeah, so Adrian Phillips, I was just looking this up. The Patriots list Adrian Phillips at 5'11", 210. So he's essentially the same size as Adrian Phillips, maybe a little bit bigger, a little bit thicker than Adrian Phillips is. He's smaller than Kyle Duggar is. So as great as his open field athleticism is, his click and close, like when he recognizes what he's seeing and his ability to close on the football from there is absolutely tremendous. I mean, it's ridiculous. The other thing that Nikobi Dean's really good at is he's got a great spatial awareness of the trash, right? All the moving parts and things around him. He's got this matrix flexibility to just be able to bob and weave and duck under contact. That's really unique. I don't know if I can think of another prospect that is able to just slither in and out of blocks like Nikobi Dean can. And he kind of has this sixth sense of where things are coming from and where blockers are coming from. I haven't really seen anybody be able to do that as well as he can. Maybe like a guy like Patrick Queen a few years ago, but it's something really, really rare. So I love Nikobi Dean too, but I'm with you. I think that he's essentially He's a money backer for the Patriots, right? He's Adrian Phillips. He's Kyle Duggar. Maybe he's a nickel for them if they see him that way instead. I want to answer this question about Jacobi Meyers because who has an extra E in his name, by the way. Jacobi, we're not talking about this a whole lot because there's other things to be talking about that we're not really talking about. Jacobi Meyers' restricted free agent year here. I think it's a really interesting conversation to have about Jacobi Meyers' is a long-term future with the Patriots because in 2022, I could see Kendrick Bourne being a better receiver in this offense than Jacobi Meyers, right? I think that there's a path where Bourne is your number one Z receiver and overtakes Jacobi Meyers on the depth chart. I could also see a path where they draft a Sky Moore or they draft a Wan'Dale Robinson or they draft one of these guys that then becomes better than Jacobi Meyers in 2023. Right. So having Jacobi Meyers on the roster on a second round tender in 2022 makes a whole lot of sense. But I think there's a very real possibility that they have him here as a bridge to whoever they set up to be the next guy to take over that mantle, whether it's Kendrick Bourne in a more short-term bridge or they have a guy that they're drafting on day 2, like a Sky Moore or somebody like that they're then going to develop in 2022 and then put into that role in 2023. And they just want to get there with Jacobi Meyers in between. I have a tough time envisioning a long-term extension for Jacobi Meyers in his future with the Patriots.
Yeah, I would add on top of that, when we had Miguel on, what did he say? They were probably going to tender him at the second round level.
Right. It's a cheap contract. Yeah.
Well, let's say somebody tries to match that. What would you rather? Would you rather have Jacobi Meyers or a second round pick in this draft? Let's put it this way, right? So let's say somebody tries to match Meyers. You can either essentially pay Jacobi Meyers a year early, or you can get started with Wan'Dale Robinson, right? He's going to be a second round pick. He's probably going to go about where that pick would come in.
Right.
I wonder if and teams generally haven't been super into signing RFAs in recent years, but I mean, Jacoby's a 1,000-yard guy. You don't just find those. He's like 9 whatever last year. I would be interested to see what would happen if somebody tried to offer Jacoby an RFA contract. I wonder if the Patriots wouldn't match it. I really do.
Yeah, I think I've already given my Jacobi Meyers take. The biggest thing that I have concerns with Jacobi Meyers is that he doesn't do anything after the catch, right? He's a guy that can get open. I wish he got open or got into his route a little bit faster sometimes. I think that's something that isn't necessarily due to a lack of explosiveness, but more so just a timing thing that maybe they can continue to work on with him. But what I don't think that he can improve on significantly more than what he already has is his ability to pick up yards after the catch. And that's an element of their offense that they need. They need that slot receiver, especially a guy that's going to be as high volume as what they do with Jacobi Meyers. They need him to be able to pick up. Yeah, if Jacobi Meyers was better in YAC, he had been way over 1,000 yards last year, right? Yeah. I mean, that's the issue that we have here is that there's no real explosiveness to his ball carrying skills. Like there's no real next gear once he gets into the open field. And I think that they need that player in that role to have that. I don't know if they can be as good of an offense as they want to be if their Z or their slot receiver is not somebody like Edelman or Brown or Welker after the catch as just an explosive guy in the open field. It's a tough role to be able to produce that because it's going to produce such a low yards per catch average anyways, because you're running crossers, slants, in breakers, option routes, things like that. You're not going to put up 17 yards per catch running the juke series with the Patriots. So you got to add even every 3, 4, 5 extra yards that you do per catch is important, even if it's not taking a 3-step slant and turning it into an 80-yard touchdown. Taking a 3-step slant and turning it into a 16-yard gain instead of it being an 11-yard gain is really something that this Patriots offense needs.
Yeah. I mean, that's what it comes down to. And look, I think there's still a role for Jacoby on the team. But if you can get a better player, if moving on from him means you can get a better player, I mean, that's roster building. That's what you do. That's the whole essence of it.
All right. Okay. This person said his name 3 times. So I do want to talk about Jameson
Okay.
Williams for a second. We've talked about this before. I can't decide right now. If you look at a lot of consensus boards, I don't think the consensus board that we use has him at 21, but some of the other ones that I've seen floated out there on Twitter have Jameson Williams right there, right 20, 21, somewhere in that range.
And the board we use, NFL mock draft, NFLmockdraftdatabase.com, they have him 17 on the big board, 26 on the consensus mock draft. So that's in the neighborhood.
Because there's no question about it that Jameson Williams, in my mind, is every good as a prospect as Jalen Waddle was. And Jalen Waddle was a top 10 pick in Miami because he was healthy, right? So you're getting that level of speed and that level of game-breaking ability, but you're getting it probably 15 picks after you probably would normally get it in the draft, right? But at the same time, he's injured. And I don't have as much of a concern about playing the long game with Jameson Williams and hoping that he comes back and all that sort of thing quickly. My bigger concern is re-injury. And is tearing ACL is going to become a thing for him? Because the worst thing that you could possibly have is that Jameson Williams finally works his way back. He gets on the field for the Patriots, and on his third target, he tears his left ACL, right? Because he's overcompensating or something like that. That would be, with all the bad luck the Patriots have had picking wide receivers early in the draft, that's how this movie goes, right?
Yeah.
That's how this movie goes. So I almost want to stay away from Jameson Williams just to avoid that catastrophe altogether. But again, my bigger concern with him is re-injury, not necessarily him healing from this ACL that he has right now.
Yeah, and by the way, he's listed at 6'2", 185. He's not like a big guy.
No,
he's big, he's tall, but he's not. He's going to take hits.
Yeah, he's going to
take a beating. My thing with Jameson Williams, I've been waiting for something to kind of talk me out of this take, and I haven't gotten there yet. With the Patriots specifically, and look, he's my if he's healthy right now, he's my wide receiver 1 in this class. Like he's a top 10 pick, and we're not even bringing him up. But my thing with Williams as it relates to the Patriots is, I remember like they've had so much trouble developing receivers. And remember with Harry, he got off to that great start, and then he hurt his hamstring in Detroit in the preseason game. And like 3 years later, really has never caught up to where he was. And I think, some of that's on him, some of that's on the team. They try to rush him back from that injury, which was bizarre. And it's if they take a wide receiver in the first round, and I don't think they have a shot at Williams in the second round. That's why I feel different about Mechie, because I think you can get him later. Right. If you take a wide receiver in the first round, he has to work. He has to work. I think you're putting Mac Jones' development on the line with that. I don't want a guy. I'm not putting that much on a guy who won't be there for mini camp, for OTAs, for training camp, right? That first offseason, preseason is so crucial to a wide receiver's development. And instead, you're going to have him not just coming into the team cold, coming into the NFL cold in October or November. And then you look at the way this coaching staff is set up. I just don't. I think it's a tremendous risk to try to wedge his development into all of that.
Right.
Especially given the way they've struggled to develop receivers in the past. Well, now you have to develop a guy again, but you're 4 months behind schedule and the season's going on. That part just worries me.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm out on Williams. And again, Mechie's different for a couple reasons.
He's later on
second round. He's a second round pick.
Might even
worked
be later
with Mac. Right. He's worked with Mac. That's a little different, but yeah, I'm out on Williams for now. Again, if I can be talked out of it, like I'm not dug in on that take, but that's how I feel right now.
It's much easier to recover from an ACL now. Again, I think we're both in the school of thought that we're not worried about him recovering from the ACL. We're worried about what happens next after he recovers from the ACL, right?
I'm worried about him recovering like as a football player, not necessarily like raw physically.
Right. You do feel like, though, his role, and maybe this is something that they won't end up doing, and this is kind of the Wan'Dale Robinson discussion we were just having, right? But it's jet sweeps and stuff behind the line of scrimmage. It's crossers and it's verticals, right? Like, how hard can that possibly be to get that guy into the offense? It's just at some point you have.
Wasn't that also supposed to be N'Keal Harry's role
in a way? But N'Keal Harry wasn't a 4-2 guy. You know what I mean? Right? Like, Jameson Williams' speed is just so game breaking and so ridiculous. I mean, I posted a clip of him today against Mississippi State where he takes a 12-yard hook and just outruns the entire defense, right? I mean, it's just, he's got that level of breakaway speed that is next level. Now, I'm with you though. It's tough. It really is tough to take a player, especially in the first round, that's injured, right? If you're talking about a second round pick, way different. A first round pick with an ACL injury, that's a tough.
Especially at that position. Look, they did this with Chad Jackson years ago. This was the idea behind drafting Chad Jackson, was you were getting probably a top 10 talent coming off a torn ACL. Another one a lot of people freak out at, and by the way, if they do draft Williams, he doesn't work out. If you've tweeted about Dominique Easley since 2017, you're not allowed to, and you want them to draft Jameson Williams, you're not allowed to complain if he doesn't work out. Like, this is the people who are calling for this. I just think it's a little funny, given a lot of what, basically everything we've given this team, a lot of what we've given this team heat for in the draft process for the last few years. And again, I think the two guys, it's kind of a crossroads of N'Keal Harry and Dominique Easley. And that's not to say I don't think Jameson Williams will be a bad player. Like, I think in the right spot, he's going to be very good. But I think that where the blind spots are for this team in terms of the draft and player development, Jameson Williams sits right in that blind spot. Yeah. So it's such a tremendous ask for them to take him and get it to work, because it's everything that's been elusive to them for the last 5 or 6 years, or maybe longer. Yeah,
I feel like that's why I've gravitated towards a guy like Olave if they're going to go first round, because he's the type of technician that usually succeeds here.
Right.
Guy more on day 2 for that reason too. I think there are other names that obviously we can throw out there, and we'll probably, as I keep, obviously repeating, we definitely will. The Patriots will end up taking Drake London or something like that just to torture me.
Oh, you love Drake London.
Oh my gosh.
Big Drake London guy. NFL mock draft database. He's not a consensus first round pick.
Good, because here's the biggest problem with Drake London. Okay. He's 6'5", 210 pounds. The guy's a green bean, right? He's not Mike Evans. Everybody wants to compliment Mike Evans. Mike Evans was 6'5", 230 pounds. Right? Drake London is not that size. He's much skinnier. He's much thinner than a guy like Mike Evans. He doesn't have the play strength of a guy like Mike Evans. Oh, God. Foot speed, not there. Route running ability, good for a 6'5" receiver. What does that mean? That means bad, right? Like, saying a guy runs good routes for 6'5" is just admitting that the guy's a bad route runner. That's the type of guy that they like, because he's big, he can block, he can go up and get the ball, and they'll draft him, and he will be N'Keal Harry again, right? Like, it's just the same thing.
Right.
If he runs in the 4.4s, then I'll change my mind, but he's not going to. He's going to run mid 4.5s. I'm sure of it. And a lot of people that I respect, a lot of really big draft experts, Todd McShay, Dan Brugler from The Athletic, a lot of these guys have Drake London very, very high on their boards. So I'm definitely in the
You're breaking from the pack this year between Drake London, Devin Lloyd. You just hate the Pac-12, clearly. You're just still bitter at the Pac-12 for
it's an N'Keal thing, right? The thing that I always can come back to with Devin Lloyd is, I think that what happens with guys like Devin Lloyd is that people type in Devin Lloyd's name on YouTube, they pull up Devin Lloyd highlight best linebacker in the nation, and they watch 5 minutes of Devin Lloyd wrecking shop on a highlight reel, right? But when you actually go and you study Devin Lloyd's tape and you break down him play by play, he's very, very raw from off the ball. He doesn't understand how to take on contact. He doesn't click into blocking schemes very quickly. He's just a raw processor from off the line of scrimmage, and quite frankly, just didn't look very interested in taking on very many blocks. So yeah, I can post a bunch of highlights of Devin Lloyd where he's unblocked and he's just allowed to just trigger to the football and he's a ridiculous missile and just taking guys out. But the second that he has to work through some contact, the second that he has to figure out where the football is, those are where the concerns start to happen with Devin Lloyd. I think he's going to be a great football player in 2 years. I don't think he's going to come on like Micah Parsons did and be an argument for Defensive Player of the Year as a rookie. 2 to 3 years from now, maybe he gets there. Right now, I'm just not seeing it. I think Nikobi Dean's a much better prospect, much better player right now. And I would put Devin Lloyd right in the same conversation as those day 2 guys, Quay Walker, Chad Mumma, Christian Harris. I think all those guys are right there with Devin Lloyd. He's a better athlete, maybe a little bit more versatile than some of those players, but they're better processors than him. Chad Mumma is a much better technically sound linebacker than Devin Lloyd is. There's my Devin Lloyd take. We lost Alex. You're muted or something.
Yeah, here I am. Let me try something here real quick. Kayvon Thibodeau, what are your thoughts on him?
Similar, right? Like, obviously an explosive athlete, but I also watched, who was it that I watched recently that from UCLA, their left tackle. He had a really good game against Kayvon Thibodeau. And he's not exactly like, Sean Ryan from UCLA.
Sean Ryan, yeah.
Some people think he's going to move inside the guard in the NFL.
Well, okay, hang on.
Thibodeau on the outside. Like, what are we talking about here?
So let me finish my experiment, and then I have something on that. Trent McDuffie, how do you feel about him?
Love Trent McDuffie.
Okay, yeah. Kyler Gordon.
Lukewarm. Like, I think he's a good prospect, but I don't think he's a first-round guy.
Okay, you just said you like Sean Ryan, right?
Yes, as like a day 3 pick, yeah. Or
okay.
Like late day 2 or early day 3 pick, yes.
Those are all the projected Pac-12 top 100 players. You basically hate all of them except McDuffie.
I like McDuffie, yeah.
So you're pretty much across the board out on the Pac-12. Although
Here's
you did have
problem that I have with
you did have CJ Verdell in your mock draft though. So
I did in the 7th round. This is the problem that I have with the Pac-12. Everybody looks fast in the Pac-12. If you can run,
because the games are late at night.
If you can run and you play in the Pac-12, then you look fast. Okay, it's not the same speed as what they play at the SEC level. It's just not, right? Like the fact that Drake London can maybe pick up some yards after the catch does not translate the same way that Treylon Burks does in the SEC. When Treylon Burks pulls away from the Alabama defense and scores a 60-yard touchdown, that's game speed, right? That you can sit there and say that dude can run. When you see it from Drake London, I'm not as sold anymore. You're right. I have been skewed by N'Keal Harry, but in a lot of ways, I like to think I've learned from N'Keal Harry. Right?
That's a nice way to put it.
That they just don't move at the same pace out there. They just.
How do you feel about Kyle Phillips? Right? Yeah, Kyle Phillips.
I'd rather Sky Moore, certainly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Only other Pac-12 wide receiver projected to go top 200.
I see Phillips. Like I see his shiftiness. I see his ability to set up his routes, but not on the same category as a guy like Sky Moore. To me, I think he's a tier below. But yeah, that's ultimately what it is.
Would you say the speed thing applies to him too, that you were just talking about?
A little bit, yeah. I don't think he's like a burner by any means, right? I don't think he's super fast. But yeah, I think he's definitely somebody that can get open, that knows how to get open. But I don't think he's super fast. That's the problem that I have with the Pac-12 guys. Trent McDuffie, I think when you watch him on tape, he moves at such a different level than everybody else on the field in the Pac-12 that I think he's actually fast, right? Like I think that he's real game fast because he can truly, he can catch anybody in that conference. The biggest issue that I have with how things, where I scout and when I look at these guys, I wish I had some of the data that the NFL teams have now where you can look at real game speed. Like how fast is this guy actually moving? Yeah.
Right.
Because the 40 times for a lot of teams, the combine next week, we're going to talk about it multiple times on the show. We're excited about it, but a lot of teams don't even pay attention to the 40 times anymore. It's more so a fact-finding mission. You get in front of a lot of players in one spot in succession. You have the interviews, you have things like that. Those are all beneficial. Medicals is obviously beneficial. Yeah. And watching the guys go through drills in person, I think is beneficial for a lot of old school scouts. But the 40 times, I mean, nowadays you have chips and pads and things like that, and they say, oh, this guy ran 21 miles per hour here, 20 miles per hour there. That's probably a lot more relevant at this time than a 4.35 is, right? It's just, that's the day and age that we're in.
I mean, you know why the 40 is why that's the measurement?
Well, it's consistent, right? Everybody's running the same 40 and the same.
Well, no. Do you know why they start, why 40 yards? Why not 50 yards? Why not 30? Do you know why 40?
No, tell me.
I learned this a couple years ago. It's fascinating. 40 yards at the time was the average distance of a punt. The idea was, how fast can a player get downfield to cover a punt? That's where the 40 comes from. That's what it's measuring. How fast can you get downfield to cover a kick?
Right.
That's ultimately what the measure. So when you think about how much we put on that and what the origin of it was, it's kind of funny, right?
Well, it is, especially because it's irrelevant for 90% of the positions, right? Because a lot of guys aren't running 40 yards. I think the difference is that, like, when I'm assuming Jordan Davis is going to work out next week. When he works out, the 10-yard split will be massive for him. If he has a really low 10-yard split and he hits that number, then that's going to help his stock. Nobody is going to look at Jordan Davis's 40 and care what he ran 40 yards.
You're telling me Jordan Davis isn't going to be a gunner? If he comes to New England, I wouldn't rule it out. He's athletic.
10-yard splits shows the explosiveness, shows that ability to get off the ball and all that kind of stuff. So that's helpful. Guys like Aaron Donald, had a ridiculous 10-yard split, right? Those are the types of things that you look at for there. But I have a tough time with the combine now because I love it. I enjoy the heck out of it every single year. It's one of my favorite events on the calendar. But nowadays, I don't know how much teams are really finding much relevance with the workout numbers, right? Like, there were once upon a time the Patriots anybody that had a low 3-cone, the Patriots were drafting, right? That was the old joke. Nowadays, I don't know how much they actually look at the 3-cone as much as they used to.
Yeah, no, again, that I always find it interesting, specifically a lot of those drills, but specifically with the 40, that's where it comes from. But you're right about the Pac-12 speed. We've come a long way from Chip Kelly's Oregon Ducks and Michael James and those teams. Really quick rant, because I know we're over, but you said about Sean Ryan, right? Everybody wants to move him into guard.
Yes.
As a member of Hardo Film Draft Twitter.
Yes.
Why do you people do this? Every single year, you look at the tackle prospects.
Yeah.
If the guy is anything short of Joe Thomas, the summary in the scouting report is he's probably a guard. Oh, this guy's not literally an immediate all-pro tackle. Yeah, he probably should be a guard. You're taking guys who are 6'9" and moving him into guard, which makes no sense. What is the obsession with, this guy's not a perfect tackle prospect? It's not like it's like 2 or 3 guys every year. Like, it's, he's not absolutely perfect. The hands, the feet, the athleticism, all of it. There's a single flaw. F it. Guard. It's so freaking annoying to me.
Okay, well, I would say the two things, and these are probably pretty obvious to most people. The biggest reason why a guy would move inside a guard is length, right? If you don't have the arm length and you don't have the upper body length to be able to punch and extend on a guy at tackle, it becomes really difficult to keep your chest clean, and that's how you get caved in. If you can't keep guys off of your chest as any offensive lineman, it's obviously a bad thing. But especially out at tackle, it really allows the edge to be super soft. Like, guys are just going to get right through your edge if you can't set and really extend your arms and have that length. So that's a big one. The second one I would say is range, right? Like, how far out can you get when you set out of your stance to be able to cut off the corner? If you can't explode out of your stance and cut off the landmark initially that you need to get guys to run the arc and go behind the quarterback, then a lot of people will say, well, he needs to move inside the guard, right? Because he doesn't have the redirect or the athleticism or the range to be able to get out to a wide 9 or to be able to get out to a stand-up edge rusher. So those are the two biggest reasons why. A guy like Ryan, his issue is tightness, right? He doesn't have the range. So a lot of people see him as a guard because he's a little bit limited athletically. I mean, I am with you. If he's got good tackle,
it's too much. Yeah. Like, I get it for some guys.
Guy would say that he should start at tackle, and if he fails at tackle, that's when you kick him inside.
Fine. Stop saying that 90% of the tackle, and not you specifically, but because I like to double check. I go through, I read the scouting reports. I'm curious what other people are saying.
Right.
90%, it's especially bad this year. 90% of tackles is probably a guard at the next level. Like potential first round picks
Right.
is probably stop. There's going to be no tackles left. There's going to be a league of all guards if these people have their way.
And I don't want to out the person because I respect the guy, but I read a scouting report on Bernard Raymond the other day that had him moving inside the guard.
Yeah, exactly.
I was like Bernard Raymond,
90 pounds.
He's got 33-inch arms. Like, where is he moving? Like, he's a converted tight end. Like, it's
out of control.
Yeah,
out of control. That was my point.
Yeah,
there's a place for it. There's a place for it, but it's an overused dynamic. It's an overused dynamic.
Yeah, Isaiah Wynn, you get it, right? Because he's small for a tackle. He doesn't have the length. He doesn't have the height. Yeah. That makes more sense. But Bernard Raymond, who's 6'6" with 33-inch arms, I think he can stay at tackle.
You better not want to throw over like him. You're going to put him and Darian Kennard in the middle at guard. Well, you better not want to throw the ball over the middle, or you better have a tall quarterback. You better go out and get Brock Osweiler.
Alex Leatherwood's a good player. You give Alex Leatherwood to Dante Scarnecchia, you'd be a Pro Bowl.
Yeah, Alex Leatherwood is just the Raiders.
Anyways, on that note, 15 minutes over with Alex recovering from COVID-19.
We were going to go short.
Very normal for us here on the Patriots Beat podcast. Everybody say, a prayer for Alex. And he's obviously doing much better. We're very happy about that, to have him back on the show. And next week, it's the Combine, Alex. Are you ready? Are you excited? Are you pumped?
I don't know that I'm ready to run a 40, but I'm ready to watch a bunch of people run 40s. Maybe I'll run a COVID 40 next week, and I'll run a COVID 40 right before the show, and we'll see how deep into the show I'm still catching my breath.
Well, Combine next week, Tuesday. Combine preview episode. Hours straight of straight Combine talk. I'm sure Alex will have a Combine written preview on 98.5 thesportshub.com. I'll obviously have one on CLNS as well. And then we'll tune in at some point during the workouts and break down some of the things that have already happened. The following week on that Tuesday after the Combine, we'll recap the entire week at the Combine, not only just the workouts and who stood out and all that kind of stuff, but if there's any chatter, this is when the Patriots start to do business, right? This is when you might start to get some things on free agents and things like that. We'll discuss those things as well. So big week next week here on Patriots Beat. Big couple of weeks coming up. We got the Combine next week. 2 weeks after that, it's the start of free agency. So here comes the NFL offseason right at you, right? These next 6 weeks or so with the Combine, then free agency, then the draft at the end of April. This is kind of the real NFL offseason, and it's going to be a really good time here on Patriots Beat. And yes, everybody that's recovering from COVID, Alex included, I hope you guys all feel better. And prayers up to the Ukraine once again. Let's not.
What a close to the show. Look at you.
This
COVID,
is great.
Ukraine, just
this is why they should give us an award, right? Anyways, we'll be back on Tuesday. We'll talk Combine then, and we'll see you guys all next week. Enjoy your weekend, everybody.